Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos in their Week 10 matchup played November 15th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. Peyton Manning would end up throwing 4 interceptions in this game, including an interception on the very first possession as he was intercepted by Peters on 3rd and 7. And so now the Chiefs would take over on the Denver 31, and a few plays later, Charcandrick West on 1st and goal from the 4 would punch it in for a 4-yard touchdown. Santos added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Kansas City just minutes into this game. So the Broncos would go 3 and out on their next possession, and the Chiefs would take over, and they would end up with a field goal. Cairo Santos hit a 48-yard field goal with a little over 6 minutes still left in the first quarter, and that made it 10-0. So then after both teams would go 3 and out on their next possessions, Peyton Manning would throw his second interception of the game, this one with just under half a minute left in the first quarter still, as he was intercepted by Smith. And so now the Kansas City Chiefs would take over at the 50. They would bring the first quarter to a close as they were up 10-0. And in the second quarter, just minutes in, with about 11 and a half minutes left before halftime, Cairo Santos would hit a 49-yard field goal to make it 13-0. The Broncos went 3 and out on their next possession, and the Chiefs would punt after 5 plays, and then Peyton threw his third interception of the game, this one 5 minutes before halftime, as he was intercepted by Mauga. And so the linebacker intercepted him, and the Chiefs now took over on the Denver 24, and Santos would end up kicking a 34-yard field goal from the 16 on 4th and 2, and that would make it 16-0 Kansas City. Denver then went 3 and out on their next possession, and this is, of course, 3.5 minutes left before halftime. But then now after the punt, the Chiefs would take over with about 2.5 left before halftime on their own 39. They'd move into Denver territory. They got all the way to the 9-yard line, but then they ended up losing 6 yards. And so they moved back to the 15 for 2nd and goal, and a couple of incomplete passes would bring out Cairo Santos to kick a 33-yard field goal on the final play of the first half, as it was 19-0 going into the locker rooms at halftime, as the Chiefs were just dominating in the first half on both sides of the ball. Of course, they were getting some short fields due to those 3 first half interceptions by Peyton Manning. So the Chiefs went 3 and out on the first possession of the second half. So did the Broncos on their first possession of the third quarter. And the Chiefs would take over on the Denver 41, and Cairo Santos would kick another field goal. This one a 50-yard field goal, just over 4 minutes into the third quarter, with less than 11 minutes left in the third. And it was now 22-0, as they had scored 22 unanswered points at this point. And Peyton Manning would then, on the next possession, throw his 4th interception of the game. This one with less than 10 minutes left in the third, as he would be intercepted by Parker. And so with that 4th interception, that would do it for Peyton, as he was benched at this point in the third quarter. The Chiefs would punt on their next possession, and Brett Osweiler would take over. He would go 3 and out with the Broncos offense on the Broncos' next possession after that 4th interception by Peyton. And then the Chiefs went 3 and out. And then Osweiler, after having started off on the Denver 1 and driving into Kansas City territory all the way to the 30 to end the third quarter, starting off the fourth quarter in Kansas City territory, getting all the way down to the 12. But then Osweiler was sacked on 3rd and 2 by Houston. Justin Houston with the sack drops him for a loss of 8. And on 4th and 10 from the Kansas City 20, they decided to go for it at this point, as they were down 22-0. And Osweiler was intercepted by Eric Berry. And that was the 5th interception by the Kansas City defense of Denver's quarterbacks in this game. And so that set the Chiefs up on their own 19-yard line. And on 2nd and 9 from the 20, Alex Smith went to Charcandrick West, and he went 80 yards for the touchdown. Santos added the extra point, and it was now 29-0 Kansas City. So Charcandrick West at this point had both touchdowns, and as it would be, he would have both touchdowns for Kansas City as he bookended the field goals by Cairo Santos, as Cairo Santos had 5 field goals in between the 2 touchdowns by Charcandrick West, as he had that 4-yard run in the first quarter and then this 80-yard touchdown pass from Alex Smith to make it 29-0. So the Chiefs just dominate in this game. But now the Broncos in garbage time, there's still 11 minutes left to play, down by 4 scores, and Osweiler would lead them into the end zone as he would end up getting a handoff to Hillman for a 1-yard touchdown, and that would put the first points on the board for Denver, and they would actually go for the 2-point conversion. They tried a QB sneak, and they did not get it, and so it was 29-6. The Chiefs would end up going for a field goal on their next possession. It was a 48-yard field goal attempt, but it was wide right as Santos missed the field goal, as he had already had 5. He almost had 6. Earlier in the season, he had had 7 in a game. But now with the missed field goal, Denver took over on their own 38, and they would drive into Kansas City territory. And on 4th and 2 from the Kansas City 7, Osweiler hit Andre Codwell for a 7-yard touchdown. McManus added the extra point, and it was now 29-13. Kansas City now would get the ball, and they would end up just pretty much running the clock out, and Smith would take a couple knees, and this game came to a close. And the Kansas City Chiefs are now 4-5 on the season, 2-3 on the road. Denver, after starting 7-0, they've lost 2 in a row. They're now 7-2 on the season as they lose their first game at home at Mile High in 2015. They're now 3-1 in Denver. So the Broncos, they were missing a lot of players in this game. DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, just to name a couple, as well as some others. And Peyton, he was banged up. He probably shouldn't have played, he said after the game, but he tried to gut it out, and it didn't work out for him at all. It did work out for the Chiefs, though, as they came up huge on defense. They were getting after him. They were in the backfield, and they were forcing those turnovers. They said they had the 5 interceptions. They also had 5 sacks as well. So a big game for the Kansas City Chiefs defense, as Peyton Manning had the worst game of his career. He had a 0 QBR. He was just 5 for 20, just 35 passing yards and 4 interceptions for Peyton Manning in this game. And Osweiler came in, he was 14 for 23, 146 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Who would think Osweiler would have a better line than Peyton Manning in a game? But we look at Alex Smith, he was 17 for 31, 204 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Charcandrick West, 24 carries for 69 yards, including a touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for 92 yards, which gave him 161 total yards. He also had a receiving touchdown, that 80-yard touchdown. He was responsible for both touchdowns for Kansas City, as he had 2 total touchdowns in the game. He had a huge game, Charcandrick West. And Demaryius Thomas was the leading receiver for the Broncos with 7 receptions for 71 yards. Hillman had 11 carries for 42 yards. But we look at the kickers. McManus 1 for 1 on the extra points, and that was the only kicks he attempted. Cairo Santos 5 for 6 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. And on defense, Johnson had a sack, Houston had 2 sacks, Howard had a sack, and DeVito had a sack for Kansas City. And Parker, Smith, Berry, Mauga, and Peters each had interceptions. So the 5 sacks, 5 interceptions. So their defense came up huge. Howard also forced a fumble. And for Denver, they had one sack. That was Von Miller, who had their lone, or actually they had two sacks, rather, excuse me. Von Miller had a sack and Williams had a sack. We had team stats: first downs, 18 first downs for Denver, 13 first downs for Kansas City. On third down, the Chiefs were 4 for 16, 25% converted. They went for it once on fourth down, 100%, 1 for 1. Denver was 3 of 14 on third down, 21% converted. They went for it 3 times on fourth down, converting twice for 66%. Total net yards, 303 for the Chiefs, 221 for the Broncos. Netted total. On the ground, the Chiefs netted $106. The Broncos netted 69 yards. And through the air, the Chiefs netted a 197 as Smith was sacked twice, losing 7 yards. And for the Broncos, 152 total net yards through the air as they let up 5 sacks for 29 yards. And we look at the penalties. 11 penalties against the Chiefs for 102 yards. Usually that would be a bad thing. It's definitely not a good thing, but it didn't hurt them, being that they had all those turnovers. And the Broncos, 5 penalties for 55 yards. They fumbled once. They did not lose that fumble. We look at the red zone. 1 for 3 for the Chiefs, 33%. 2 for 3 for the Broncos, 66%. And we look at the time of possession, 33 minutes and 27 seconds for Kansas City, 26 minutes, 33 seconds for Denver. The thing is, most of Denver's positive stats came in garbage time when they were already down 29-0. Because at that point, when they had the 4 interceptions, they benched Manning. He only had 35 yards at that point. Kansas City went up 29-0. Osweiler came in, and he was able to kind of toss it around. He did get picked off once. He did have the 1 touchdown. Like I said, it was garbage time at that point. And really, Kansas City, they stayed dedicated to the run. Charcandrick West, 24 carries for 69 yards. Not a lot of production per carry, but it was that they were dedicated to the run. And that's the thing, is that you got to run the ball no matter what. You got to stay dedicated to it. The Broncos actually averaged more yards per play, per rushing play. They averaged 4.3. Kansas City only averaged 3.3 per rushing play. But the thing was, since they were dedicated to the run, they kept running the ball, and that would keep their defense off the field, keep them rusted. Of course, their defense not rusted. Their defense was just phenomenal. They kept forcing those turnovers. And you see with Denver, they 5 interceptions. They threw the ball 44 times, and they only had 13 runs. So, if you're having such, bad luck on, passing, why would you keep throwing it? Denver's supposed to be able to run the ball, but they ain't run the ball. And that's why they lose the game, is they're not dedicated to the run. You got to run the ball. You got to have a balanced attack. If you're just going to keep tossing up there, the Chiefs will ball hawk it. They will pick you off. And they were getting after Peyton. They were getting after Osweiler. By the time Osweiler came in there, though, this game was already well over. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They get the victory as they avenged their loss earlier in the season at Arrowhead. And now they get the win at Mile High against their AFC West division rivals. So it's a big win for the Chiefs to beat the Broncos. In the West, hey, this West ain't over yet. It was looking, a lot of people wanted to say that the Broncos had this division well in hand. And yes, they are still, up by 3 games. But even still, don't count out the Raiders or the Chiefs. And now they're tied for second with the Raiders losing today. The Raiders had a chance to gain some ground with the Chiefs knocking the Broncos off, handing them their first loss in the division. But even with the ground that they've got to make up, at the beginning of the season, I picked the Broncos, to not really do too well this year. They started off really hot. But really what my point was that no matter how good their defense is, and their defense is really good, they had that big game against the Packers, but ever since then, they lost to the Colts, now they lose to the Chiefs. But the issue is on offense. As good as their defense is, Peyton Manning, he's a Hall of Famer, no doubt, but he's not having a Pro Bowl caliber season. See, that's the thing, is like he has a Hall of Fame career, but this season, though, is, he's definitely not putting up the numbers that we're accustomed to seeing from him. And we saw last year he was having somewhat of a drop off. I mean, it's just a fact of life, As you get older, you're not going to be quite as physically, capable to do the things you used to do. He's still got it upstairs, but, just a lot of it too, the new system in Denver, it's changing the system at this late, in your career and everything. Only a guy as good as Peyton would be able to even do what he's been able to do this year, which he's done. He's had his moments, but then right here, you see him having the worst game of his career. I believe he's gonna, he should bounce back from it, but he needs to get some rest. They should probably start Osweiler next week and let Peyton sit and get healthy. If he can get healthy, then maybe they have somewhat of a chance. Hey, they're still in first place. They still got an excellent defense. They've got a running game if they give them the ball. But if they continue to just pass, well, they're going to have outcomes like you saw today. And the Chiefs, this is how, I expected to see them playing more like this throughout the season. They've been struggling so far, and of course, they're without, Jamal Charles, who had went down earlier in the year, but Charcandrick West doing his best Jamal Charles impersonation. Maybe not so much on the ground, but that 80-yard touchdown was almost like shades of Jamal Charles. And of course, Cairo Santos, he's pretty automatic. He did have that one missed field goal, but he kicked 5. He's pretty active for kickers. And they're kind of the issue for Kansas City. They've got an excellent defense, but Alex Smith just really isn't, much of a quarterback as it is anyway. So they've got their issues at quarterback as well. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. And actually, one last thing that's actually a side note, which is like, this video's already over, but Peyton Manning, in the worst game of his career, actually happened to pass Brett Favre on the all-time passing yards list. He only needed 3 yards to pass Brett Favre to take first place for the all-time leading passer in NFL history for passing yards in a career, and he did pass Brett Favre. So Peyton Manning, like I said, he's a Hall of Famer. He just set the record for the number 1 passer, but who would have thought that you would set the record for being the number 1 passer of all time in NFL history for passing yards in a game where he had 4 interceptions and just 35 passing yards? That's kind of, I don't know, like a double-edged sword or something. It's kind of, it's a bittersweet is what that is. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. As I said, thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great weekend and enjoyed all the sports.